Nothingness. What is nothingness? Nothingness can never be perceived by the sense organs, nor conceived by the mind. Nothingness is only the change from one positive thing to another positive thing. You become what you perceive. You are not nothing, and therefore can never become nothing. So you cannot perceive nothingness, for nothingness is never perceived, but only otherness. When the world is examined objectively, emptiness is the background of all appearance, because it is there before and after appearance. Examining it subjectively, yourself as consciousness is the background. This emptiness is thus consciousness itself. This is why the average man and even some yogis see emptiness when the world disappears, because they look at all things objectively. But if you ask why the world appears, you must ask the world and not me. The world must explain itself to you. How to transcend the void or nothingness? In your attempt to reach the absolute, you transcend the realm of objects and senses, and sometimes get stranded in a state of void or nothingness. This void or nothingness, though highly subtle, is still objective in character. And you remain as that positive principle which perceives that nothingness also. The real nature of this I principle is consciousness, or knowledge itself. Looking from this stand as consciousness, you see the void or nothingness transformed into consciousness, and it becomes one with the I principle. So whenever the concept of nothingness confronts you, take the thought that nothingness is also your object and that you are its perceiver, the ultimate subject, whose nature is consciousness itself. Immediately, the shroud of nothingness disappears in the light of consciousness, and it becomes one with the I principle. This void is the last link in the chain which binds you to the objective world. Its appearance in the course of your spiritual sadhana is encouraging, since it forebodes the death knell of the world of objects in the light of knowledge. You see, even when you take this last I thought, people ask you what you are thinking about. They cannot understand that you are not thinking of any object at all, but that you are only trying to stand as that principle which is the background of all thoughts. The thought that you are consciousness removes all sense of space limitation. Sri Buddha first analyzed the external objective world in the right yogic fashion, utilizing mind and intellect as instruments, and at the end reached what may, from the phenomenal level, be called the void or nothingness. A negative can never subsist by itself, much less can it be the source of positive things. That which was called void or nothingness has to be understood as Atma itself. Buddha must have gone beyond and reached that Atmic principle himself, but Sri Buddha's followers seem to have stopped short and interpreted the ultimate to be that void or nothingness. The following verse, describing the last determination of Sri Buddha, proves this when he said, "Unless I know the ultimate truth, I am not going to stir from my seat, even if it be for several thousands of years." This proves that Sri Buddha must have reached the Atmic principle, which is the absolute truth. Object. What is an object? One perception, as we generally call it, is really the resultant of ever so many distinct and separate perceptions. We see only one point at a time. It is only after this point has disappeared that the next point can be seen. It is only thousands of such points that seem to make up a so-called object. A point that has disappeared does not remain as such. It is foolish to try to collect and join them together to make up the object or perception in question. Even the point itself, when examined, is reduced to a geometrical point, a mere idea. So, looked at in the right perspective, an object and its perception are non-existent. How does an object serve me? An object is innocent in itself and serves you in accordance with the perspective through which you view it. If you view it as dead and inert and as distinct and separate from you, it takes you from the center of your being to the world outside. But if you look upon it as something appearing in consciousness, and if you emphasize that consciousness aspect of it, immediately the object points to you, the source of that appearance, consciousness being your real nature. If objects are lit up, your real nature alone shines there. When the emphasis is on the objects lit up, consciousness appears limited. But from the standpoint of consciousness itself, it is never limited, there being nothing else beside it to limit it. But the ego wants to continue the illusion, and so says, "I know it," even when the it, meaning the object, is nowhere in the knowledge to which every perception is reduced. You generally say, "the form appears," but this statement has two parts, form and appears. Form is objective, and appears is something subjective. To whom does it appear? Certainly to you. Therefore, you light it up by your consciousness. So every object points to consciousness. You see, the reality of every object perceived by you is only your own reality. And that object has no independent existence other than yourself. No perception ceases until the object has been reduced to knowledge or recorded in knowledge. Then the object no longer exists as such. What is the function and the fate of an object? An object is there always pointing to the consciousness of the perceiver as you, which means thereby, I am here merely on account of you. But the moment you stand as consciousness, and turn back to the object vanishes. In other words, the object commits suicide. But what happens to objects when they are known? In order to perceive anything, we must use any one of the five senses. Each sense returns the verdict that the thing is its particular object. That is to say that after the sense organ has sensed it as its own object, consciousness faces the object and knows it. At the end of every function, knowledge dawns. Just as each sense organ is capable of sensing only its own particular object, consciousness also can know only consciousness. Thus, knowing the object means that the object is transformed into knowledge, and the object is no longer the object as before. The objective counterpart of knowledge can only be knowledge, jnana. After every activity, knowledge dawns. This means that knowledge is the background of activity as well as inactivity, just as it is in the interval between two perceptions when you stand all alone in your own glory. When looked at through the eyes, the object appears as form, which is the counterpart of that sense organ. And when looked at through knowledge, the object appears as knowledge itself, since knowledge can have no other counterpart. I know it equals I know myself, which equals I know the truth, which equals I am the truth. The background of objects and sense organs is the same. In a similar way, the background of senses is also the same consciousness or I. Knowledge has nothing for its object except knowledge. With the seeing, form appears. But when you know the seen subsequently, it becomes knowledge itself. And everything is transformed in terms of the instrument used. Thus, using consciousness, everything is reduced or transformed into consciousness. For even the statement, I know, is wrong, because I and knowledge are one. In experience or knowledge, both subject and object merge. Objects are nothing but form, sound, touch, taste, or smell. It is evident that any one of these can never be separated from its respective sense organ, even in thought. So objects and sense perceptions are one. And similarly, seeing and hearing and such senses can never shine independently of consciousness. And by the same logic, they are consciousness itself. And thus, objects are only consciousness, and that is the I principle. One directs attention to something, but is it that something that we perceive by the senses? It is not. We perceive only the superimpositions of the senses upon that something. This vague something remains as the substratum of form and sound, and always remains unknown to the senses or the mind. But it is that unknown something that we want to know, without any superimposition whatsoever. So, No agent like the senses or the generic mind can be utilized, for they can only superimpose their own objects. The mind always functions conjointly with the sense organs. In the absence of these agents, neither forms nor thoughts appear, but using consciousness to know it, we see it as consciousness alone. That is to say, as one with the I principle.